The developer AMP Shopping Centres proposed to use part of Hudson Park for car parking for 12 months while Garden City is extended. The developer offered to spend $40,000 to $50,000 restoring the park afterwards. Last week, the council rejected the trade-off. According to Town Clerk Barry Lewis, the Local Government Act prevents such a deal. John Tate says the council was acting on legal advice.
There is no question that council would be wrong to approve parking on the park for a commercial use. That's part of the Environment Planning and Assessment Act, and it was quite a clear legal opinion that came from council's legal advisors.
Mr Tate rejected the Lord Mayor's assertion that the council made the wrong decision.
The council made a decision, and as Lord Mayor, it's his responsibility to implement that decision. But what he seems to be doing is putting himself above council and saying he has said that council has made a mistake in its decision. Now, that just doesn't sit true. I can't understand why he's taking this line of action. Perhaps it's because he's made promises that he can't keep, and he's trying to get himself off that hook.
I'll take that.
The developer, Tavalan, applied to increase the height of its proposed office block on the corner of King and Derby Streets from 9 stories to 11. It's reported that the company wanted to make the building more acceptable to the government's tax office specifications. But the council decided to follow the advice of council officers and refuse permission.
The reason for the officers advising us that way was that it was too tall a building. It was going to overshadow part of Civic Park. It was going to be not as good for the streetscape as the previous design.
Do you think this will jeopardise the developer's chances of attracting the tax office there?
Well, it certainly won't do his program any good, but I think that he'll be able to be as competitive as anybody else. I certainly hope so. I don't want to see that jeopardised, but by the same token, I don't want to see a building that doesn't have the support of our architectural panel built in the middle of the city.
Sarah. Meet Sarah. She's a new resident at the Garden Suburb Nursing Home and is one of the few pets as therapy dogs in the Newcastle region. Today, Sarah was presented to the nursing home by the Lions Club of Newcastle. For the 85 patients, Sarah is their full-time companion, walking around the corridors and popping in for some affection and even a kiss. Sarah is a product of the Pets as Therapy scheme, which has been going for more than 5 years. They've sent dogs all around Australia, and Sarah was a reject from the Guide Dogs program before she was trained for her new role. Hygiene is important, so Sarah has her teeth and eyes cleaned every morning and washed so she doesn't even smell like a dog. Sarah has already proved her value, she's already popular and has made for many more smiles around the home this Christmas.
Hello, I'm Karen Lemming. Today marked the end of the school year for more than 90,000 Hunter Valley School students. In tonight's news, we'll take a look at some last day happenings and preview the new 4-term school year for 1987.
Join Ray Deneen and Anna Manzoni for all the news tonight at 6.
Two weeks ago, a workshop was held involving business leaders, property developers, resident groups and council aldermen to list priorities for the revitalisation of the central business district. 7 were identified, including the formation of a central authority, improved parking and traffic access, and promoting the CBD and tourism. Newcastle's Lord Mayor, Alderman John McNaughton, says the action plan will now go before Council.
The whole exercise was authorised by a decision of Council. So our action plan will go to the first meeting of Council as a report to Council on the 27th of January next, and the Council will then be in a position to make decisions about how to implement the plan, and the plan is in pretty fine detail for the first 6 months, has been sorted out by the 30 people who participated here today.
South of the Catherine Hill Bay turnoff, wreckage of the 2 cars held up northbound traffic and disrupted southbound traffic for some time. Police say the 1983 Ford sedan by David Hunt and the 1983 Volvo sedan being driven by Eddie Lowe 38 to Sydney collided. Both drivers were tracking their cars for some time as rescue workers tried to free them. Mr. Hartman was eventually freed and flown by the rescue helicopter to the Royal Newcastle Hospital with chest injuries. Passenger Michael Perry from Coffs Harbour suffered shock and abrasions, later transferred to Belmont Hospital. Mr. Lowe was trapped for over 2 hours, but when freed, was taken to the ward suffering from a fractured hip. He is now in satisfactory condition.
Christmas and New Year over the holiday break, 23 people died on northern roads. To try and reduce statistics like that, Police Minister George Paciullo last week launched one of the most intensive campaigns to enforce road safety in the state's history. Now the NRMA has joined the campaign by warning motorists, especially city drivers, about the risks of driving on country roads. Assistant Branch Manager of the NRMA in Newcastle, Lindsay Somerville, says half the 1,067 people killed in New South Wales last year were killed on country roads. He says, in particular, this year, motorists should be aware of the hold-ups at Hexham and the notorious Bulahdelah Bends.
It's, for a lot of them, a lot different to the normal day-to-day motoring around Newcastle, to suddenly get out on those open roads and really go for a long stretch. And I think the main theme is to be aware of your environment.
Anything in particular that motorists should be aware of in the region?
Yes, I think it's local conditions basically. Signs are there to help people get through them. And to give you a couple of examples I think a lot of people in Newcastle can relate to would probably be the bends between Bulahdelah and Torres. They are signed for speed, and we just ask people to observe those signs.
Ryan joins Newcastle's Jane Horsley, state champion in this exacting sport. Jane won the Ladies Open yesterday. Ryan is a member of the Barnett Training School from Sydney and is just an example of the talent for which the school is famous throughout the nation. The Sydney facilities do, though, give the divers quite an advantage through, of course, no fault of their own.
Just after 10 yesterday morning, a strong field of runners heeded the start gun, fired by Parramatta Rugby League coach John Money. Many of the runners underestimated what was before them and took off like rabbits. But the best of them lurked in the middle of the field, knowing that enthusiasm would not be enough. After 500 metres of flat going, they hit the wall, or so it seemed, and the class showed as runners dropped out, unable to meet the challenge. 2GO sports star and pro runner of the year, Glenn Ritchie, was the hometown hero and looked a clear winner, although around the three-quarter mark along came Jamie Harrison of Sydney. But with the crowd behind him, Ritchie scrambled home. The giant bulk carrier left Newcastle Harbour about midday. On board was a near-record haul of coal bound for Europe. The carrier was constructed by the China Shipbuilding Corporation in Taiwan, measuring almost 290 metres in length and weighing 150,000 tonnes. It's one of the largest carriers to visit the port. On this, its maiden voyage, the China Fortune is carrying more than 130,000 tonnes of Hunter Valley coal to Rotterdam. On future voyages, coal and iron ore will be transported to Taiwan.
This is the largest moving object in Australia, seen arriving in Newcastle in August on her maiden voyage. The Iron Pacific is the latest and largest of 3 ships ordered by BHP from Korea in 1984 for the coastal iron ore and export coal trades. So her departure for Korea this afternoon is the beginning of a triumphant return visit to the place of her birth. She is 315 metres long and 55 metres wide and cost $45 million for her 230,000 deadweight tonnes. Today's record cargo of 196,000 tonnes contained 68,000 tonnes of Hunter Valley coal. The remainder was mined from the Bowen Basin in Queensland.
This stagnant creek in Blackwell's Park was the scene of this morning's tragedy. A 5-year-old boy and his older brother were playing in the creek. It appears that the 5-year-old slipped and fell down a deep hole. He failed to resurface. His brother searched frantically for him to no avail. He then rushed back up to the street and alerted neighbours. The neighbours located the boy near this rusty car body and began cardiac resuscitation. According to ambulance officers, the boy had a faint pulse when paramedics arrived on the scene. It is believed that the boy was underwater for about 10 minutes. Despite attempts to restore his heart rhythm, he later died at Wallsend Hospital.
The tiny girl's ordeal began sometime between 11 o'clock last night and 1:30 this morning at Charlestown. Police say her abductor forced his way into the Alexander Parade home through a lounge room window. They say he then took the sleeping girl from the bedroom she shared with her 11-year-old sister. It's believed he then took her to Boomerang Park at Mayfield West, where she was assaulted and abandoned. The girl was found by the daughter of a nearby resident, Rosalind Falconer.
Well, around about 1:30 this morning, my daughter was in the lounge room and she heard this little whimper. And she came out and looked outside and here was this little girl crossing the road. And she said, and she went down to her and she said, "Oh, come here, sweetie, come here to me." And she just grabbed her by the hand and Shelley came upstairs to us and said, "Look what, I found." And we said, "Oh my God," when we saw her, the state she was in. And we jumped out of bed and came down and my husband rang for the ambulance and police and they were here in a matter of no time.
And what sort of condition was the little girl in?
Oh, she was marvellous. She was so calm. No, she wasn't crying and, wasn't in shock.
Was she badly injured?
No, not physically that we could see. She did have blood around her, but physically she seemed to be quite okay.
Today, a team of 8 detectives from Belmont, Charlestown, the Regional Crime Squad and the Juvenile Services Bureau began door-to-door inquiries in the vicinity of the Alexander Parade home. A major lead for police was the discovery of a burning green Honda Civic sedan behind the Tubemakers Recreation Club at Mayfield. The car was reported stolen at about the same time and from near where the abduction took place at Charlestown. Police believe it may be connected with the offence and have asked anyone with information to come forward.
This would be one of the most serious crimes that we have had committed in this area. We ask any person that did see this little child or any person with her at any time to contact us as a matter of urgency.
Tonight, the girl is in a satisfactory condition in the Mater Hospital after undergoing surgery. Yesterday, the tiny girl was taken from the bedroom of a house in Alexander Parade at Charlestown. Her abductor then took her to Boomerang Park at Mayfield West, some 8 kilometres away, where the assault took place. She suffered internal injuries and is now in a satisfactory condition in the Mater Hospital. Police believe a green Honda Civic sedan, stolen from near the girl's home at about the same time as the abduction took place, was used in the incident. It was later found burnt out behind the Tubemakers Recreation Club. Today, the team of 8 detectives questioned residents near the girl's home and gathered scientific evidence from the assault scene. It also followed up information gathered in the last 24 hours, but they say they still need the help of the public in solving this brutal crime.
This is how many people in Newcastle began their Christmas. All the churches reported good attendances on this, the celebration of the birth of Christ. The spiritual significance of Christmas has waned in recent times, but church leaders say it's now enjoying a resurgence. After church, what else is there to do but open presents? That is, if you manage to resist the temptation earlier in the day. But let's face it, present opening is a serious business, especially when you have to help your little brother, as well as ripping the paper off your own gifts. What would Christmas be without the traditional fare? With preparation over, all that's left to do is to pull the bonbons, put on the hats, drink to Christmas cheer, and tuck into all that lovely food.
Now who wants some peas and beans?
There were those who opted for a less traditional Christmas lunch on the beach, or just sitting on a bench, watching the surface and enjoying a bottle of wine.
It's French Beaujolais.
If you have to work, it's nice to know that you can spend the little time you have with the family. This dad decided to spend his few hours free from driving an SRA bus with his wife and children at the seaside. Those of us who had to work will surely agree that the ambulance officers at Hamilton had the right idea. Well, if you have to work, you might as well join in, get the Christmas spirit and enjoy it.
Preliminary work on the regional museum site at Wood Street will begin on Monday. This follows the City Council's decision this week to award the construction tender. But exactly how the $4.6 million project will be paid for is still undecided. Town Clerk Barry Lewis will prepare a report on the various funding options by April. By then it should be known whether the city will get the long-awaited funding from the Steel Regions Assistance Program. Federal member Alan Morris says the funding is at risk because of the government's cost-cutting measures and because Newcastle has been slow to make a detailed submission.
After 3.5 years, there was still something like $4.5 million in a 5-year program that hasn't yet been allocated, largely because we haven't had the applications until the middle of this year.
So does Newcastle have itself to blame for the failure of the tourism component of the steel plan?
Well, we would have to accept some responsibility as a community. The program was a new program. It was difficult to get submissions developed, and to be honest, it's taken a lot longer than most of us would have liked. And that in itself has made us vulnerable to the accusation, well, if it was so important, how come it's taken so long to get your preparations completed?
John McNaughton agrees the city has been too slow applying for the money, but he says the council is committed to making the museum a reality.
But there's absolutely certainly it will go ahead. It's a matter of some enormous importance to the city that a project like that does go ahead. It's something of real art and heritage and cultural significance for the whole region, not just Newcastle, but the whole region will benefit from having that. And it was a very bold decision, I believe, of the council to proceed with it.
John, thank you very much.
More than 1,000 competitors from throughout eastern Australia were showing their form in the somewhat tame conditions at Terrigal Beach. Clubs had come from as far away as Wollongong in the Cronulla area to the south and Coffs Harbour and Southport, Queensland to the north. There was even a boat crew from Auckland, New Zealand competing. The field included many state and Australian champions. In the Ironman events, champion Robert Chapman easily won the Open, while Australian junior surf champion Brad Stokes of Southport took the juniors. The Open surf race went to New South Wales champion Michael McKeon of Wollongong, and in the ladies, the Malibus went to Karen Hardy of Allura, while the surf race was won by Jodie Larson of Cronulla. The two best local performances were by the entrances Peter Noble, who won the gruelling pentathlon, and the Swansea Belmont boat crew, who took the Open surf boat. Traditionally, Australia and Japan have had a very strong trading relationship in coal. Indeed, Japan has been the major importer of Australian raw materials. But the increased value of the Japanese yen could have a big effect on that relationship. The strengthening of the yen has made Japanese industry, including the steel industry, less competitive on world markets. This, in turn, has prompted a review and restructuring of industry in Japan. According to the General Manager of BHP's Collieries Division, Rob Chenery, this restructuring is likely to result in a reduced need for Australian coal.
I think it's going to be necessary for all raw material exporters to reassess the situation and take the decision that they are going to have to go for other markets other than Japan if they want growth in their business.